Good morning, 10th grade. We have just a short video today to catch up where we didn't quite get done yesterday, concluding the Vietnam War. Well, no, we're just getting started on the Vietnam War. Sorry, I'm in the wrong class. All right, so we've got, yesterday we left off here. We were talking about the Gulf of Tonkin resolution. This is American sailors on board a ship get attacked in the Gulf of Tonkin, and because of that, America issues the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, which basically it's the American Congress giving the President of the United States the authority to defend American servicemen at any cost. So he immediately increases the number of American troops over time, of course, because you can't get that many people there at once, to 542,000. So more than half a million American troops are in Vietnam. They're fighting. The war is difficult because it's jungles. Of course, if you are familiar with anybody who served in Vietnam, many of them were exposed to chemical agents like Agent Orange that was used to kill off the jungle weeds so that they could see who was coming and who was attacking. It's very, very difficult terrain and difficult fighting. The Tet Offensive is the next thing we need to talk about, though. Tet, and I know we talked about it yesterday, but we're going to hit the highlights of it again today just briefly. Tet was a Vietnamese holiday. It was like New Year's, okay? So for this Tet Offensive, the Viet Cong, who remember are the communist sympathizers in South Vietnam. You walking down the street, you have no idea who they are. Is the person you're about to meet up with a Viet Cong, or are they a South Vietnamese citizen who loves his government and his country? You just don't know. There's no way to tell them apart. So they're hiding down there. They plan this big Tet Offensive where they for a little bit of time take over several cities in South Vietnam. Now the American and South Vietnamese troops are able to quickly get control and take them back. And it is not at all a victory for the North Vietnamese, but it is a victory in the sense that it turned the American media and a lot of American people against the war. So it is a propaganda victory for the communists that they are now in control of the situation. All right. So because of the Tet Offensive, because of the turning tide of American thought against the war, President Johnson initiates peace talks and begins what they call, he and Richard Nixon, the next president after him, call the Vietnamization of the war. This means we're going to turn the war over to Vietnam and let them fight their own battle. Okay? So Vietnamization is turning that all the efforts over to Vietnam, letting them fight their own battle. Nixon thought that this would be a way for us to get peace with honor, that we, let them take care of their own things and we bow out. Unfortunately, South Vietnam quickly fell to the communists, and by 1975, the whole country was united into one communist country. And they had achieved Ho Chi Minh's goal for unity, but it was unity under communism. Okay, so let's turn our attention to a different continent. We're still talking about communism as it spreads around the world. Let's look at Africa. The African continent had been colonized by the British, the Dutch, the French. Who else was there? Several different European countries had all gone into Africa and taken a piece of it. They'd broken it apart in pieces. And we studied this back somewhere either right before or right after World War I. And Africa is now attempting to break free of that colonial rule now that World War II is over with. And several revolutions are going on around the continent. This is a large continent, okay? America would fit in Africa once, if not twice. Okay, it's a big continent. Um, so some of these nations, as they broke free from colonial rule, from the British, the French, the Dutch, the Germans, all these, they began looking to communism for help. And unfortunately, the West, meaning America, Great Britain, France, the first world countries of the world, didn't care. We didn't care enough about the Africans to keep them from communism. So they did end up in communism for a little while, and many of them will eventually break free. There are still some communist governments in Africa, but it has destroyed the continent. There's some of the poorest countries in the world are in Africa. Let's look at Latin America real quick, and then we'll be done. Cuba is probably the most well known as far as communism goes here in America. Fidel Castro took over Cuba in 1959. Okay, he seizes power. He is a friend to Brezhnev, who is now in control of the USSR. He seizes power in Cuba, and people begin to flee, trying to just get out of Cuba. Many of them set sail in homemade boats for Florida, because Cuba is only about 40 miles off the coast of Florida. So they do that, and we still to this day have a large Cuban population in South Florida. So the American government gets this brilliant idea, and I'm using that sarcastically, to plan an overthrow of Fidel Castro, to get him out of power. They plan this overthrow with these Cuban citizens that are currently living in South Florida. So they send them all home and say, okay, we're going to come to your aid. You plan the attack. We'll come help you. But they didn't show up. Not the citizens. The citizens showed up, and they tried to overthrow Castro. We didn't show up. Our government didn't show up at the Bay of Pigs. We did not fulfill our promise to those Cuban citizens to help them. And the Bay of Pigs was a huge, huge disaster. These people that had gone back to Cuba hoping to win freedom for their country, many of them ended up prisoners of war or dead, because we did not show up. Other countries, Nicaragua, El Salvador, Panama, all of these countries have fought off communist and Marxist dictators. We did show more resolve, thankfully, in dealing with these countries than we had with Castro. And that is the end of section 2. On Monday, we will start looking at the showdown between the powers. We will look at the space race, as well as perestroika. We'll look at Poland. We got a lot to go. We're in a good place. Okay? I hope you have a great weekend.